I'm 66 now, and I've learned something people don't put on postcards. Evil doesn't always arrive with a snarl. Sometimes it arrives with a smile, a soft voice, and a ring that's too expensive to feel like love. I watched that kind of smile die on my patio. I watched a family man go still as a badge caught candlelight. I heard handcuffs click, clean, final, like a gate closing. And I didn't cry, because that moment wasn't grief. It was payment. Let me go back, because the ending makes sense only if you understand what my land means to me. My name is Marian Cross. Most people call me Mary. I didn't inherit my life. I built it the way you build a stone wall, one heavy piece at a time, hands scraped raw, stubborn enough to keep going. In my 30s, I bought a rocky slope nobody wanted. Banks called it high risk. Neighbors called it a bad idea. I called it mine. I was a single mother then. My daughter Leah used to drop her backpack at the door and run outside like the vines were calling her name. She learned to tie training wire before she learned to drive. She learned patience the way children learn weather, by living through it. I worked 2 lives at once. I sold houses all day, smiling, negotiating, pretending I wasn't tired. Then I drove to the slope and worked until my arms shook. One night, Leah fell asleep on a tarp beside the posts I was setting, curled up like a kitten, dirt on her cheek. I covered her with my jacket and kept digging in the dark. Years passed like that. Frost warnings, heat spikes, pumps failing at midnight, bills that never waited, and finally, clusters worth pressing. The first bottles lined up on a shelf like proof I wasn't crazy. Then came a bigger press. Then a small tasting shed with 4 chairs and a crooked sign. Then more parcels, inch by inch, pain by pain. People underestimated me the whole way. I left them. Underestimation is cheap armor. By the time I reached my 60s, the place was real. A working winery with staff, schedules, barrels, and rows that ran like green rivers down the hillside. A stone crush pad that stayed cool even in summer. A tasting room that filled on weekends. I hired a vineyard manager named Mateo Alvarez. Steady hands, sharp eye, loyal in the rare way you can't buy. He could read a vine the way some men read a stock ticker. He also had a gift for noticing trouble before it arrived. Leah grew up and built her own path. She studied viticulture, apprenticed in other cellars, wanted a life that wasn't only my shadow. I was proud of her, and when she left, the farmhouse got louder at night. That's the part nobody admits when you make it. Success doesn't fill a kitchen when you set down one plate. It echoes. I was lonely, not desperate, just open in a way I hadn't been for years. That's when Edwin Ashford found me. Not at my gate, not at my tasting room. At a charity wine auction in a coastal city. Soft lighting, hard smiles. Money pretending it's generous. Edwin stood like someone who expected doors to open. Silver hair, tall posture, the kind of pressed jacket that never wrinkles. He bid on my reserve. High enough to feel flattering, easy enough to feel intentional.
I've heard about your vineyard, Marian. People say you built something rare. I'd like to see it, if you'd allow me.
His voice was smooth. Not loud, not needied. He held my hand a second too long, just enough to feel like attention. And I felt seen. He visited the next weekend. Then again, like routine was the point. He asked the right questions. He listened when I talked about frost and fermentation, the way men at dinners never do. He planned little getaways, coastal drives, quiet cabins, candlelit restaurants where he picked the wine like it mattered. I wanted to believe it was admiration. I wanted softness after a lifetime of grit. After less than a year, he proposed. Sunset on the hilltop row. A ring that made my stomach drop. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was expensive in a way that felt like leverage.
Marry me, Marian. Let's stop pretending we're meant to be alone. Let's make a real family.
I said yes. And the moment I said yes, I met the other part of him. His children. 3 adults who moved like a team. Colton, early 40s. Finance energy. Smiles that don't reach the eyes. Sloan, late 30s. Property developer confidence. Always assessing. Always measuring. Bryce, mid-30s. Vague consulting. friendly enough to slip into your systems. Their first visit to the estate after the engagement felt less like meeting family and more like an inspection. Sloane walked through my farmhouse like she owned the air. She didn't admire. She evaluated. Beams, windows, upgrades, the view like it was a price tag. Colton asked numbers the way people ask about the weather. Production, revenue, margins, debt. Bryce asked about clean paperwork. And then, like it was nothing, asked about my will. I waited for Edwin to shut it down, to say, "That's inappropriate." Instead, he squeezed my hand like I was the one being irrational.
They're only being responsible, Marian. We should make sure everything is in order. That's what adults do.
Responsible. It's such a polite word. It's also how wolves get invited inside. Leah flew in for the wedding. The night before, we sat on the porch with 2 glasses of red, crickets singing, the rose dark and quiet, like listening ears. Leah told me she had a bad feeling. She said Edwin's children weren't curious, they were hungry. She asked if I had a prenup. I did. My attorney, Rosa Patel, insisted. Rosa had known me long enough to recognize predatory charm. The prenup was clean. My land, winery, brand, and accounts remained mine. Separate property, sealed tight. Edwin acted wounded when I brought it up. Hurt, but controlled.
If you need that to feel safe, of course I'll sign. I don't want paperwork between us. I want you.
He signed too easily, and that should have scared me more than an argument would have. Because men who want your money argue about paper. Men who plan to take it don't. Here's what I didn't tell Leah, what I didn't even tell Rosa at the time. I made one quiet decision. I never told Edwin or his children the full truth about my ownership structure. When they asked, I gave them fog. I let it sound like the estate was tangled, old cooperative family holdings, a trust here, a stakeholder there. Not a dramatic lie, a strategic blur. Something in my gut said, keep your cards close until you know who's at the table. The wedding was small and beautiful, vines overhead like green lace, lanterns, Leah beside me, Edwin's children smiling too brightly. Sloane hugged me and called me Mom. It should have been sweet. It felt rehearsed. We didn't take a honeymoon. Harvest was near. I couldn't leave Mateo holding everything together. Edwin said he understood.
Of course I understand. This is your life's work. I'm proud of you.
The first year of marriage was good. That's the truth. Edwin drank my wine on the porch, played golf at a private club, hosted Sunday dinners, and laughed like a man who belonged. And for a while, I let myself breathe. Then, the second year arrived, and the air shifted. Not with a storm, with pressure. The kind you feel in your bones before a front hits. Colton started requesting a look at the books. Sloane started showing up with insurance people and talking about unlocking value. Bryce started offering to streamline online sales and centralize systems. Every offer had HUP. Every hook needed access. I kept saying no. Calmly. Clearly. Edwin's response changed. He began sliding papers toward me at the kitchen table, like signing was a married person's hobby. Beneficiary updates, standard authority forms, account streamlining. I read every page. Half the time, it wasn't standard. It was power, permission for him to touch what was mine. I refused. Again and again. Why won't you sign, Marian?
Don't you trust me? We're married. We shouldn't have secrets.
Then he'd go cold. Silence for days, like punishment delivered cleanly. And then the charm would return. Apologies, roses, soft hands, like he was resetting the trap. He started taking calls outside, walking between vine rows where leaves swallow words. When I asked, he shrugged.
It's just my kids. You're imagining things. Don't make this into something ugly.
You're imagining things. The sentence that tries to turn your instincts into shame. 3 years in, the mask slipped too far. I came home from a distributor meeting exhausted, hair smelling like diesel and wine samples. I walked into my office in the winery building. Edwin was there. Colton was there. Sloane was there. My filing cabinet was open. Papers spread across my desk like spilled guts. They jerked when they saw me. Not surprised. Caught. Edwin smiled like he was hosting me in my own room.
We were looking for insurance documents.
Sloan had a point about coverage. You should be grateful we're helping.
I told him those were private records. I told him he had no right.
I'm your husband.
There shouldn't be locked doors between us. What are you hiding?
That wasn't curiosity. That was a man building justification. That night, when Edwin went to bed, I called Rosa Bedell. I told her something felt wrong. I asked her to run a full property check. Every filing, every record, everything tied to my land. 3 days later, Rosa called back, with a voice like steel wrapped in patience. Someone had been filing documents against my property. Transfers, partnership claims, ownership structures that included Edwin's name, his children's names. Signatures that looked like mine from 10 feet away and fell apart under comparison. Forgeries. Rosa said the filings alone were dangerous. Even if they didn't hold, they could muddy ownership, create delay, apply pressure, make me tired enough to surrender. She told me to file a report immediately. She told me to confront Edwin. I didn't confront him yet, because confrontation warns predators. It makes them move faster. Instead, I called an old friend, Cal Rourke, a private investigator I trusted from past property work. I asked for everything on Edwin Ashford, court records, patterns, financial history. And I asked about his late wife, how she died, what happened to her estate. Cal didn't ask why. He asked how deep I wanted him to go. I told him I wanted the basement. 2 weeks later, he slid a thick file across a coffee shop cable, paper that felt heavy like it carried weight. Edwin's first wife, Delia, had signed everything to him months before she died. There had been a cognitive decline diagnosis. Her sister had tried to challenge the transfers, said the signatures looked wrong, said Edwin pushed paperwork at the worst moments. The dispute ended quietly. Small payout. Edwin kept the rest. And Delia wasn't the only one. Before Delia, there was Marian. Another marriage, another accident, another transfer shortly beforehand, another family member who tried to contest and hit a wall of lawyers and respectability. Cal showed me civil records tied to Colton, ethics complaints tied to Sloan, sealed settlement patterns around Bryce. Not rumors, paper. Cal looked at me and said very quietly, "They weren't unlucky. They were practiced." I sat there with my hands around a coffee cup I didn't taste. My chest felt locked, not panic. Rage held so tight it became stone. Cal told me to run. Divorce, restraining order, clean exit. And for a heartbeat, I considered it. Then I pictured my rows, posts I set in the dark, harvest nights I spent awake checking temperature, decades compressed into living wood. These people thought they could walk in late and take what took me 30 years. With forged signatures and marital guilt. No, I went back to Rosa. I told her I wanted a real case. Fraud, forgery, conspiracy, criminal consequences. Rosa warned me. It would be ugly, public, messy. I told her my reputation was built on integrity, and integrity doesn't hide thieves to look polite. We built it methodically. Forensic accounting, signature comparisons, filing timelines. We found more forged documents, attempt after attempt, like someone probing a fence for weak spots. We found messages, plans, roles, timelines, the kind of language predators use when they think they're just doing business. And then Rosa made a call that changed the shape of everything. She brought law enforcement in early, quietly, with the evidence packaged clean. Detective Ines Salgado met us at my attorney's office. She didn't promise revenge. She promised procedure. She said warrants could be issued if the paperwork and communications were strong enough, and if we could catch them together, cleanly, without giving them time to scatter. That's when I decided on the dinner. An anniversary celebration. Something warm on the surface. Something a predator would attend confidently. I told Edwin I wanted the whole family. His children, Leah, a few friends, good wine, good food, sunset over the rose.
That's wonderful, Marian. I knew you'd come around. This is what I've wanted. A real family. Together.
He heard surrender in my invitation. He didn't hear strategy. Mateo set tables on the patio. White cloth, simple flowers, lanterns strung overhead. The air smelled like rosemary and warm stone. I opened bottles I usually saved for true milestones. Colton arrived first, confidence polished bright. Sloane arrived smiling like she'd already chosen drapes. Bryce arrived joking, too loud, trying to stay casual. Edwin arrived last, kissed my cheek like a victory lap. Leah arrived with her partner and gave me a look that said, "Are you sure?" I squeezed her hand once. I had warned her. She was ready. Then my friends arrived. Rosa Patel, folder in hand, calm as a locked door. Cal Rourke, quiet eyes, the kind that miss nothing. Detective Salgado, no drama, just presence. And 2 guests Edwin didn't expect. Delia's sister and Marin's adult son. When Edwin saw them, his face lost color. Not surprise, recognition.
Marian, what is this? Who are these people? Why are they here?
I kept my voice calm, the calm you find when you've already done your crying in private. I told him it was a family dinner, and family deserves honesty. I introduced them by name. I watched Edwin's throat tighten the way it does when a lie meets a mirror. Colton shifted in his chair like he wanted the driveway.
Sloane's eyes flicked toward the gate. Bryce's smile collapsed into confusion, then fear. Detective Salgado stepped fully into the lantern light. The badge caught the glow like a hard star. The patio went quiet in a new way, quiet like a locked room. Colton pushed his chair back. Detective Salgado told him to sit. Her tone wasn't negotiable. I stood at the head of the table with a glass of reserve red, deep color like sunset turned to ink. I asked them a simple question. Did they really think forged filings could steal a life?
Marian, you're confused about what you're seeing. This is absurd. You're embarrassing yourself in front of guests.
I told him I wasn't confused. I was finished pretending. I told him we'd found the filings. We'd matched the signatures. We'd documented the communications. We'd built a timeline.
Those filings were legitimate. There were discussions. We were trying to help you. You always resist help.
Then Delia's sister spoke, voice shaking, eyes steady. She told the table she'd been warning people for years. She said Edwin used respectability like armor. Marin's son spoke too, rawer, angrier. He said his mother was afraid near the end. He said Edwin brought paperwork when she was vulnerable. He said the signatures never felt like her choice. Edwin's eyes snapped toward him like a warning, old habits trying to work automatically.
That's a lie. You're twisting things. You weren't there. You don't know what you're talking about.
I told Edwin I knew exactly what I was talking about. Because he'd tried it on me, in my kitchen, at my table, with his standard forms, with silence as punishment and charm as a reset button. Rosa opened her folder. Tabs, copies, comparisons. Paper organized like a weapon. Detective Salgado spoke next. Short, clean sentences. Names, charges, fraud, forgery, conspiracy. The kind of words that change a person's future in one breath. The next minutes were chaos. Bryce started swearing he didn't know anything, trying to separate himself from the blast. Sloane cried, then raged, then begged, like she could negotiate reality. Colton tried to turn threats into spells, lawsuits, connections, consequences. Edwin said very little. He stared at me with hatred sharp enough to cut.
You're doing this to me. After everything I've given you. You're vindictive, Marian. I loved you.
I stepped close enough that only he could hear me under the noise. I told him no. He didn't love me. He loved my land, my buildings, my barrels, the view, the value. And then I gave him the last piece, the one that made his eyes flicker. I told him the vineyard was never his to touch. Not legally, not structurally, not secretly. I protected it before he ever arrived. I told him. I let him believe it was family property. Tangled, cooperative, foggy, because fog makes predators slower, and slow predators get caught. The handcuffs went on. Lantern light caught the metal. It looked almost pretty. Jewelry for monsters. Patrol lights flashed against my stone walls. The vines stood silent, watching, as if they'd seen men like him come and go for centuries. After the arrests, life didn't become peaceful. It became procedural. Interviews, evidence, hearings. The grind of truth. Slow, thorough, exhausting. Colton and Sloan took a plea, reduced time for admissions and cooperation. They still tried to call it a misunderstanding, but paper doesn't care about spin. Edwin went to trial. He believed he could charm a room. He believed respectable would protect him. He didn't understand that evidence is louder than a suit. The court heard the filings, the forged signatures, the communications, the pattern. Investigations reopened around his previous marriages. I won't pretend I control outcomes I don't own, but I will tell you this. His polished story cracked, and it never fit back together again. Edwin was convicted. Multiple charges. Enough years that, at his age, it became a last chapter. The divorce followed fast. The prenup held. Edwin got nothing from my estate. Not a row, not a barrel, not a dollar. His legal fees crushed him. Connections didn't save him. Bryce cooperated early to protect himself. Probation, restrictions, a life permanently stained by truth. People think winning feels like champagne. It doesn't. It feels like exhaling after holding your breath for years. It feels like standing in your kitchen at midnight, hearing only the refrigerator hum, and realizing you're safe. My winery is thriving now, not because of drama, because the wine is honest, because the work is real. Leah came back, not because I begged, because she watched me fight. She told me my backbone made her want the legacy. Mateo still walks the rows at dawn, still catches problems before they become disasters, still laughs when the crew needs lightness. I never remarried. I'm not bitter about love. I'm simply awake. I tell this story to older women especially, women who built something with their hands, women who feel guilty for protecting what they earned. Because protecting yourself isn't hatred, it isn't paranoia, it's respect for your own life's work. Read every word you sign. Don't let romance rush your paperwork. Don't let anyone shame caution as cold. And if you need to keep a card close to your chest until you're sure who you're dealing with, keep it. I still walk my rows at sunset.
I still touch the trunks like old friends. I still taste every vintage and decide every blend with my own tongue. Sometimes guests ask, "Is this all yours?" They ask with awe or curiosity or greed. Now, I answer without flinching. I bought it, I built it, I own it. Every row you see is mine. Every barrel is mine.
Every bottle is mine. And then I smile, not sweet, certain. Because I was never Edwin's victim. I was his reckoning. And I'm still here, on my land, free. The last thing Edwin ever tried to give me was a whisper full of poison, right before the car door shut.
You think you won. You think you're untouchable. You'll regret humiliating me.
I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My answer was the vineyard behind me, still standing, still mine, still untaken. And that is the ending he couldn't forge.